open this public hearing of the Joint Standing Committee on Treaties for its inquiry into the exchange of notes to extend the exchange of notes constituting an agreement between the Government of Australia and the Government of the United States of America to amend and extend the agreement concerning the conduct of scientific balloon flights for civil research purposes of 16 February 2006. I begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the lands on which we respectively meet today. For me, it's the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation. I pay respects to elders past and present. I also extend that respect to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples joining us or listening today. In accordance with the Committee's resolution of 4 August 2022, this hearing will be broadcast and the proof and official transcripts of proceedings will be published on the Parliament's website and remind members of the media of the need to fairly and accurately report the proceedings of the Committee. I now welcome representatives of the Commonwealth Scientific and Industrial Research Organisation, the University of New South Wales, the Department of Industry, Science, Resources, and the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade and the Australian Space Agency give evidence today. For the Hansard record, would you please state your full name and the capacity in which you appear before the committee? And I'll leave that to you to determine in terms of going from left to right or vice versa, as perhaps as Shannon indicates.
Yeah, I had it in my opening statement to bring everybody in. Would you like me to do it individually?
Mr. Ferguson has an opening.
No, we need people to state their names and the capacity in which they appear before the committee, and then we'll come to the opening statements after that.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. So my name is Mr. Kevin Ferguson, and I am here in the capacity of CSIRO.
Hello, my name is Emma Langton-Bunker, and I'm in the capacity of Senior Legal Counsel on behalf of CSIRO.
I'm Ravi Sood, Associate Professor, University of New South Wales and Station Director, Balloon Launching Station.
Dr. Rebecca Doolan, Acting General Manager, International Science and Resources as part of the Department of Industry, Science and Resources.
Amanda O'Brien, Treaties Manager, Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade.
Christopher DeLewis, General Manager, Office of the Space Regulator, representing the Australian Space Agency.
Okay, that's everyone. The committee doesn't require you to give your evidence today under oath, but the hearing is a legal proceeding. The Parliament therefore has the same standing as the proceedings of the respective houses. Giving of false or misleading evidence is a serious matter and may be regarded as a contempt of Parliament. The evidence you give today will be recorded by Hansard and does attract parliamentary privilege. It's the responsibility of witnesses to keep track of and accurately record any questions on notice that are taken. I invite you now to make an opening statement if you'd like, and then we'll proceed to a discussion and questions.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the opportunity to discuss the Balloon Treaty with you here today. My name is Kevin Ferguson, and I'm the Director of the NASA Operations in Canberra Deep Space Communication Complex, or CDSCC. With me this morning, I have Ms Emma Langton-Bunker, Senior Legal Counsel with CSIRO, who has assisted throughout the Balloon Treaty extension process. Next to me, I have Associate Professor Ravi Sood. Professor Sood is a world-renowned balloon scientist and has been involved with ballooning in Australia since 1973, just over 5 decades. To round out the team with me today, I have representatives from DFAT's International Law Branch, Ms Amanda O'Brien, the Department of Industry, Science and Resources, Dr Rebecca Doolan, and the Australian Space Agency, Mr Chris DeLewis. Australia has a long-standing collaborative relationship with the United States on space and space-related activities, extending back more than 60 years. In fact, CDSCC, which CSIRO operates on behalf of NASA, celebrates 60 years of operational success next year. CSIRO is the leading organisation on behalf of the Australian Government, and NASA is the leading agency for the United States of America in relation to the operation of scientific ballooning for civil research purposes. The Balloon Treaty provides NASA with the use of Australian facilities and services for balloon launches, tracking and recoveries. This Balloon Treaty first commenced in 1992 and has since been extended twice. Balloon flights over the past 30 years have been responsible for some incredible scientific findings, including the first gamma-ray emission from a spinning neutron star, the discovery of gamma-ray annihilations from a black hole at the galactic centre, observations of a supernova star which exploded in 1987, and high-resolution images of the centre of our galaxy. Several astronomy research opportunities are made available through balloon flights. These include gamma ray, X-ray, infrared observations, and the monitoring of Earth's atmosphere to study climate change. It is also worth noting that X-ray and gamma ray astronomy can only be conducted by satellites and balloons, with balloons being a significantly lesser cost and time option. More recently, in 2023, the Japanese Space Agency, or JAXA, conducted a drop test of a sample return space capsule before it is integrated into a robotic spacecraft as part of a future Mars space program. Since 2012, the last extension of the Balloon Treaty, there have been 4 balloon campaigns comprising a total of 9 flights launched and recovered from Australian territory, with NASA and JAXA currently proposing future balloon campaigns to occur late 2025 to early 2026. The balloon launching station in Alice Springs is in an unrivaled location, allowing scientists to view the centre of the galaxy and other scientifically valuable objects which are not accessible from the Northern Hemisphere. Due to the large terrain offered by Australia, balloon flights can remain airborne for longer durations, providing valuable data and enhanced sensitivity of scientific results. Australia also offers the significant benefit of having vast, sparsely populated locations. Balloon campaigns are launched here from various space agencies, including NASA, JAXA, and the French Space Agency, referred to as CNES. These campaigns provide significant benefit to the local and Australian economy. The 2017 CNES campaign involved the presence of 95 staff located in Alice Springs for up to 3 months, and the 2023 JAXA campaign involved the presence of 45 staff in Alice Springs for 3 months. The local and Australian economic benefit for these campaigns is estimated to be around $5 million. I thank you for the opportunity to appear here today, and my colleagues and I are available to take your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ferguson. That was a very helpful introduction. I'll start with a few questions and then go to my colleagues. I guess I'll start with just a broader assessment of this particular treaty action. As it's presented to us, this is in essence an extension of an arrangement that has been in place for some time. It's an arrangement that facilitates all of the things that you just outlined. But from our point of view, in looking at what this means as a treaty action, is it fair for us to take it as essentially an extension of what has been an effective arrangement without there being any significant changes to the nature of that framework?
Thank you, Chair. That is correct. Fundamentally, the only request received from NASA is to extend the existing treaty for a period of 10 years. Okay. And I'll sort of just make the point that as far as submissions to the committee, and on that issue of the continuation of the arrangements as they stand, there was a submission from the Capricorn Space Agency that, of course, welcomes the extension of the agreement. That part of their submission suggests that there may have been and there may be in future opportunities to extend the scope of the agreement to cover other kinds of collaborative endeavour. Is that something that was considered? Does the CSIRO have a view about that? I think with those queries coming from commercial providers, there's no requirement for NASA against the Science Mission Directorate within NASA. It does not align with their strategic goals, and they would find it difficult to favour one commercial supplier over other commercial suppliers. And this treaty is to enable them to conduct their scientific experiments, not so much commercial experiments, over the territories of Australia.
You made the point that balloons present a kind of a lesser cost and quicker time or more timely option for certain kinds of scientific observation purposes. Are there certain kinds of scientific undertakings that balloons are actually sort of functionally superior to a satellite, or is it more the case that, if you had the time and the money, you would probably do it by some kind of satellite vehicle, but it is good to use balloons simply because they present that lower cost and quicker option.
All of what you've said is correct, Chair. It's fundamentally much quicker to put a balloon campaign in place than it is to develop and launch a satellite. The balloons and satellites can both provide X-ray and gamma ray experiments and investigations, but the balloons, they do come in at a significantly fraction of the cost of engaging a satellite to do the same purpose. I'm happy to pass to my colleague Ravi Sood if he wishes to add any further to that. Ravi?
Yes, I can add something to that. If you launch a particular experiment in space as compared to on a balloon flight, then the cost is about 10 to 100 times more, and the time period will be up to 10 years for preparing the experiment to go up in space. That is one thing. And the other thing is that if an event happens in our galaxy or in the universe which needs to be observed very quickly, then balloon flight is about the only way to go for it if you want to observe X-rays or gamma rays or infrared rays and so on.
If I may as well offer that the difference that is often unrealised is the difference between a balloon flight and a satellite, a space flight, is the technical readiness levels. You need far more technical readiness levels, or TRLs, to conduct a space flight than you would a balloon flight. So they're more difficult to obtain and they take longer to obtain.
Okay. I've just got a couple of other brief questions, then I'll go perhaps to Senator Fawcett in the first instance and then to Ms Chesters. Is there a provision through this agreement, or is it dealt with separately in relation to the potential for balloon flights to go off course or to sort of wander into another jurisdiction? The reason I ask that is because I think from the point of view of the general public, the concept of balloon atmospheric scientific undertakings would probably have penetrated the public mind in recent years with the fugitive flight of what I think I'm right in saying was a Chinese balloon over the territorial United States. I can't imagine one of the things that would presumably be a benefit of undertaking balloon observations based out of Alice Springs is there's a fair bit of the continental landmass that you'd have to drift away from before that would become a problem. But is that issue of fugitive balloons dealt with under this agreement?
Well, I'm quite happy to pass to, again, my colleague Ravi, who looks after more of the operational matters and obtaining the approvals with that. Ravi?
I'll give you an example of what happened during the last campaign involving the Japanese Space Agency. We have to get very specific permits from CASA to conduct our operations. And the one flight that we had during that campaign last year, it was flying, the balloon was projected to go towards Queensland. And the permit specifically said you are not allowed to overfly Longreach or Mount Isa. So they're very specific in what they allow us to do, and we have to then interact with air traffic control to control the flight and to terminate the flight.
This committee has only just recently considered another agreement which was to facilitate greater cooperation in space flights or space launches between Australia and the United States, space launches that occur from Australia. Is there any sort of interaction between the balloon enterprise and the broader space launch enterprise? And is there consideration given to how the extension of this agreement fits into new agreements like the one that we've just recently considered?
I'm not sure how to answer that one, I'm sorry. I'm not sure if the agency would like to take that one. Chris?
Sure. Thank you, Chris DeLewis, Australian Space Agency. In simple terms, I think, and you're referring, of course, to the Technology Safeguards Agreement treaty, which does pertain to the operation of US spacecraft from Australian territory. The simple answer there is probably to say they're two separate treaties and they don't interact with each other. And the reality is, I think that's just a reality of the practicalities of establishing treaties, in particular the Balloon Treaty, whereas this is proposed to be an extension with no further change. So they are quite separate. I'd also add that obviously NASA, National Aeronautics and Space Administration from the US government are obviously a key stakeholder. NASA is a very broad organisation that covers aeronautics and astronautics, so in this case the NASA element is more of an aeronautics and balloon side, which is quite different from their space side, if that makes sense.
Okay, thank you. I'll go to Senator Foster if he's got some questions, and then come around to my other colleagues.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to each of the agencies represented. Only a few brief questions. One just on historical issues. National Interest Assessment said back in 1957 that facilities were established at Woomera, and obviously now you're mainly based out of Alice Springs. Are there other facilities around Australia that are used in the tracking or otherwise monitoring of the flights, or is it all conducted out of Alice Springs now?
Thank you, Senator. I'll pass to Ravi Sood on the operational matters of that question.
The Australian balloon launching station was first established in Mildura in the 1960s, and that was to monitor radioactive fallout in the atmosphere. And in the 70s, we started operations in Alice Springs. And for every flight, now since 2017, we're required to carry an ADS-B transponder on the flight. So it operates exactly like a an aircraft flying in the atmosphere. So we have to communicate with other aircraft automatically and with air traffic control, and that is part of the regulations. So everyone will know exactly where we are and vice versa.
Sure, that doesn't specifically answer my question though, in that you have the balloon centre at Alice Springs where the launch occurs. Are there other facilities that are involved in tracking and telemetry of the data from the balloon?
Yes, there are. It depends on how the flight is proposed. If the stratospheric winds are going to take the flight towards Queensland, then we set up a downrange tracking station in Longreach. If it is going towards Western Australia, then we've set up a tracking station in Newman. And each tracking station can track up to 700 kilometres.
Sure, so those are temporary mobile units that are established for the purpose of that campaign and then dismantled afterwards?
That's correct.
And do they always go to the same site, the same community that hosts them?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question, please?
For each campaign where you deploy a mobile facility, does it go back to the same site such that you build an ongoing relationship with a given community?
It depends on what the scientific objectives of each balloon flights are. Very often the flights are required to be short. If you have a long duration balloon flight, then it depends on where the winds are going to take the balloon. And we do build up a relationship with the long-reach community who's done that a few times in the past decade or so. We haven't used Newman since 2010, but certainly with long-reach, we've had a good interaction with the airport management there.
Sure. Can I just go to the actual articles in the agreement? Just interested to unpick Articles 5 and 6 a little. Article 6 makes it clear that if a claim is brought by someone against the Australian government can determine if the claim has some merit, that they pass it on to the US to actually deal with or compensate people as required. But Article 5, I'm assuming the intent of that is that if there is an incident, for example, at Alice Springs, where there is no third party, it's just the US and the Australian government, that Australian government will take responsibility for the welfare, compensation, treatment, etc. of its own staff. Is that a correct assumption?
I'll pass that on to my legal colleague, Emma, if you don't mind, Senator. She's currently having a look at that article for you.
Is it the Article 5 which says neither the Government of the United States nor the Government of Australia shall make any claims against the other, its employees, contractors or subcontractors for any injury to or death of its employees, its contractors or subcontractors, or their employees for damage to or loss of its property or the property of its contractors or subcontractors resulting from activities carried out on behalf of the Government of the United States under this agreement, whether such injury, death or damage arises through negligence or otherwise. That's correct. So if we could just go back to your question again, what was your question in relation to the article?
So first is just a clarification that the simple reading of that is that the US are responsible for their people and we are responsible for our people, and that as contractors or government employees, they would be covered from a work health and safety perspective, insurance, etc., by the Commonwealth.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so that leads to a subsequent question, and I'm conscious that ballooning is perhaps not as hazardous as the world where I used to work with the US around flight test of aircraft and munitions, but I'm just interested to understand who actually has operational control or the final say over procedures, the safety call as to whether you do or don't release or launch, whatever the word is you use for balloons, such that the Commonwealth is satisfied that the people we are placing to work there are working within a system that we understand and agree with, who is making the final call on those safety-related incidents.
Thank you, Senator. I'll take that for the immediate response, and we are engaging throughout each campaign with CASA and with Air Services Australia, and nothing happens without their approval pre-launch and literally prior to launch. Does that help answer that question?
Well, for example, if it's JAXA or if it's the US who are coming to run a program, are they basically saying each time they come, they will be subordinate to CASA Space Agency in terms of the details? I'm assuming you use helium or something for filling the balloons, so handling of gases and dangerous goods as well as the actual flight aspects of the balloon.
No, thank you for the follow-up. I'll pass that particular question off to Ravi again from the operational side.
Sure.
You're quite right about the procedures. Before any balloon flight, we have to go through all the approval from air traffic control, and that is all written down in a letter of agreement with Air Services Australia. First thing that happens with any balloon flight is you get approval from Air Services Australia about the procedures that we have to follow. Then we get the approval from CASA, that's an instrument of what their regulations are going to be. And then the representative from the University of New South Wales, then has control over all the communications with air traffic control, including going on to the launch field, the launch process, and before the terminate process, there is a whole process of that we have to follow before we can terminate a flight. And with the risk analysis, one has to have the risk of 1 in 10 million for causing injury, less than 1 in 10 million for causing injury on the ground.
Sure. So it still doesn't quite answer my question of the pre-flight activities. My understanding is that atmospheric balloons tend to use, or stratospheric balloons tend to use either helium or hydrogen. Hydrogen in particular is obviously hazardous. So I'm just interested to understand who actually has control of the work site in terms of the processes and procedures that are followed. If we are saying we're going to put our people there, is it the visiting agency, NASA or JAXA, or is it Australians on the site who actually control those procedures?
We do not use hydrogen, only use helium, which is not flammable. Mm-hmm. And it's a representative University in New South Wales. We are contracted to CSIRO to maintain control of every balloon flight that happens.
Right. Okay. The only other question I have for you is that the NIA says that NASA funds CSIRO to maintain facilities and is responsible for relevant remediation work. Is that merely to do their campaigns, or, for example, do we have to make a contribution if we want to do a campaign with JAXA or do our own work there? What's the breakdown of the maintenance of those facilities?
Thank you again. The contract that we have with NASA is fundamentally to maintain and support the facilities out at Alice Springs. With regards Australian contribution, we don't do actual flights in Australia, so we don't have any contribution to make. But from a research collaboration opportunity, if NASA and an Australian researcher wishes to collaborate, it's mostly about Australians looking after their own costs associated with that and putting forward an application for, say, payload opportunities to go with the balloon flight. But no significant contributions from Australia go into the contract for Alice Springs.
Sure. But where I'm driving in part with this is if the facility is built and maintained and funded for the US, can we as a sovereign nation say we want to have the Japanese or the Germans or the whoever come and do work there, or do we need to seek permission from the US before they use that facility?
The previous practice, I believe, is the existing practice, is that if JAXA, and this is the campaigns previously, Senator, JAXA and Kines, they would reach out to the US because it's the US and Australia that have the treaty to conduct the civil research balloon flights. So they would reach out to NASA directly and form an agreement that they would fall under the same sort of liabilities within that treaty. And when that's been agreed, then JAXA would reach out to CSIRO and work a process to enable that campaign to occur.
Sure. Okay, thank you. Thanks, Chair. No further questions.
Thank you.
Thanks, Senator Fawcett. Just one more from me. So you're talking before about how the actual balloon flights occur, and you'll correct me if I'm wrong, but they are in the main or entirely the flights themselves and all the related hardware undertaken by NASA, and then Australian researchers may end up being part of the enterprise to the extent that they have some part of the payload. Is that right, or is it the case that both Australia and the US separately undertake balloon flights, and when they're doing it, it's their hardware, and when we're doing it, it's our hardware?
Well, we don't undertake balloon flights, Chair. That's the first response there. The collaboration is usually where NASA will put out a call within the research community that campaigns are about to occur for specific opportunities at specific times to conduct investigations. If there are researchers in Australia who wish to be part of that and collaborate, they would reach out to NASA and offer where that collaboration could occur, whether it's the addition of a payload or to obtain the science data as a result and collaborate with investigations thereafter.
And so where there have been these scientific collaborations with teams that also include people from Japan and France, are they also effectively piggybacking off US balloon launches, or are there balloon launches that are essentially conducted by the Japanese or the French?
The latter. So the Japanese and the French will conduct their own balloon campaign. Is that correct, Ravi?
That's correct.
Yes.
So does Australia, if Australia for some reason wanted to undertake a balloon launch of our own, do we have that capability?
I'm going to suggest we do not have that capability currently, but I would like to pass to my colleague Ravi to comment.
It depends on what we want to do at Australian universities. In the past, we have had, this including myself, had several experiments that we have flown from Alice Springs and from Longreach. Not only the University of New South Wales, but the University of Melbourne, University of Adelaide, University of Tasmania, CSIRO. That has happened in the past there. All that activity seems to have reduced considerably now. I no longer fly my own payloads.
I mean, that's one thing that I suppose some people might find curious, like with such a long history of operational success, as you suggest, we mark 60 years next year. One of the things we tend to look for in these collaborative endeavours is the extent to which they allow us to develop our own capability and some of the benefits that come from that. But that hasn't been part of the arrangement. It's not as if throughout this arrangement Australia has ever undertaken the view or gone down a path where we thought, look, as this goes forward, we'd like to move closer to the ability to undertake our own launches and develop our own relevant hardware for that purpose.
It doesn't prevent it from occurring, but it hasn't been happening of late.
Okay. All right, I don't think there are any other questions from my fellow committee members, so I'll just thank you all for your attendance here today. You will get a copy of the transcript of the evidence and have the opportunity to request changes if there are transcription errors. I don't think we've asked you to take anything on notice, so that's not a relevant consideration. But we thank you for the important scientific work that you undertake and for being with us today to help us understand what this treaty enables and what its extension means for Australia. Thanks very much.
Well, thank you. And on behalf of my colleagues and I, thank you very much for your time today. Thank you.
Colleagues, on that basis, I declare this hearing closed.